Have you ever felt exhausted by the challenges of life? Have you ever wondered if your prayers are truly being heard? Sometimes circumstances seem unchanging, pain lingers, and waiting becomes a burden. The enemy wants you to believe that hope is lost, that the future is nothing but a series of failures. But do not let those lies take hold of your mind. Today, Eternal Light brings you a powerful message, a reminder that God is still working, even when you cannot see it. He never forgets your prayers. Delay does not mean denial. Sometimes God is preparing something better for you, a victory far greater than you can imagine. Look to the Bible. Samson fell, but God restored him. Jephthah was disregarded, but God turned him into a victor. Naomi seemed to have lost everything, but God rewrote her story with blessings beyond expectation. And you, no matter what trial you face today, remember that faith is like gold. It must go through fire to be refined. Stay with Eternal Light, because right now we will declare our faith, we will pray together, and we will expect the good things God has promised. Do not leave, because what you need to hear may be the very answer you have been waiting for all this time. Darkness is not merely the absence of light. Sometimes it is the absence of faith. Imagine a small ship drifting in the vast ocean, its sky covered by dark clouds and the wind so fierce that it tilts the vessel like a fragile leaf in the raging waters. The sailor stands on deck, hands gripping the wheel tightly, eyes strained in desperation, searching for even the faintest glimmer of light amidst the endless night. But there is nothing, only the terrifying silence of a storm yet to come. That is what it feels like when faith wavers, when trials and pain become the relentless waves threatening to swallow everything. There are days when life shows no mercy. The dreams we once held dear are extinguished. The paths we believed would lead to happiness turn into dead ends. A friend betrays us, a loved one leaves, a dream shatters before our eyes. And suddenly, darkness is no longer just a physical phenomenon. It becomes a presence, whispering insidious lies into our ears. Things will never get better. You will be stuck here forever. God has abandoned you. These words slither through the mind like venomous serpents, tightening their grip on hope and leaving behind a nameless fear. But if we stop, if we listen, if we dare to believe even a little, we will realize that God is still at work, even when our eyes cannot see it. Prayer is not a meaningless act performed in desperation. It is not a letter of hopelessness sent into the void, wishing for someone above to hear. No, prayer is an invisible yet unbreakable thread, connecting us to the Creator, to the one who spoke the universe into existence. Prayer does not change God, but it changes us. It opens our eyes to see the miracles happening around us every day, to recognize that even when the world crumbles, there is a hand holding us, a presence that never leaves. Remember the story of Daniel. When he was thrown into the lion's den, darkness surrounded him, not just physically, but spiritually. Yet Daniel did not fear. He prayed. He did not ask God to remove him from that place immediately. Instead, he prayed for something greater, God's presence. And God answered. He did not take away the lions, but he shut their mouths. Daniel was unharmed because he was not alone. He did not just see the darkness, he saw the one who walked with him through it. But the enemy never stops whispering. When we are weary, when we are in pain, it draws close and fills our ears with words of despair. Nothing will ever change. This pain is forever. God has abandoned you. But these are all lies. Remember the moment Jesus hung on the cross. Darkness covered the land. Pain and sorrow filled the hearts of his disciples. They thought it was over. They did not know that God was still working. 3 days later, the tomb was empty, and death was defeated. Sometimes we are like those disciples, afraid, doubting, convinced that God is silent. But God's silence is not his absence. He is working behind the scenes, preparing something greater for us. There is a story that everyone should hear at least once in their lifetime. A man, in his dream, saw himself walking along the beach with God. On the sand, there were 2 sets of footprints, one belonging to him and one to God. But as he looked back at the most difficult moments of his life, he noticed that there was only one set of footprints. Heartbroken, he turned to God and asked, "Lord, why did you leave me when I needed you most?" God smiled, his eyes filled with love. "My child, that was not when I left you. That was when I carried you." We may not always see him, but he has never left us. We often ask God to remove the struggles from our lives, but if he did, how would we learn strength? How would we know that we can stand firm in the storm? Remember the story of Joseph. He was sold into slavery by his own brothers, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. If we look at only these moments, his life seems like a tragedy. But God does not see just one chapter. He sees the whole book. Every trial Joseph faced was a stepping stone leading him to where God wanted him to be, the ruler of Egypt, saving thousands from famine. If there had been no prison, there would have been no palace. God does not always calm the storm immediately, but he gives us the strength to endure it. One day, a father brought his son to Jesus, asking for healing. When Jesus asked, "Do you believe?" the man replied, "Lord, I believe. Help my unbelief." A humble, honest answer. A small faith, yet Jesus accepted it. He does not demand a perfect faith, just a faith as small as a mustard seed, and he will do the rest. If today you feel exhausted, if you feel trapped in your pain, remember that no trial is permanent. The rain will stop, the night will pass, the storm will fade, but God's promises remain eternal. Pray, believe, and wait, because even when you cannot see, God is still working. Delay does not mean denial. Have you ever found yourself standing in a crowded train station, watching the train pull away while your heart sinks with disappointment? Have you ever prayed for something with all the urgency of your soul, only to be met with a silence that stretches on endlessly? Delay. Delay does not mean denial, but when you're standing in the darkness of waiting, it's hard to believe that. Waiting is a strange thing. It makes us feel abandoned, as if God has forgotten us, forgotten our earnest prayers from the dreams we entrusted to him. But that is not true. God never forgets. He is not a deity so preoccupied with the universe that he overlooks a few prayers or loses track of a wandering soul. No, he sees everything, he hears everything. Yet there are seasons of waiting in life, times when we cannot understand why things are not happening immediately, why they are not unfolding when we expect them to. And in those moments, God is not testing us to break us, but refining our faith, patience, and trust. Think about Joseph, a young man full of grand dreams, but instead of stepping straight into glory, he was sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. Years passed, and surely there were nights when Joseph looked up at the Egyptian sky and wondered, "Lord, have you forgotten me?" But God had not forgotten. He was simply preparing Joseph for something far greater. Had Joseph not gone through those trials, he would never have become the prime minister of Egypt, never have been in a position to save his family and an entire nation from famine. Delay does not mean denial. It only means that God's plan is bigger, grander than what we can imagine. Perhaps you feel like you've been left behind. People around you are moving forward, succeeding, finding happiness, while you remain stuck in uncertainty. You pray, but nothing changes. You wait, but all you hear is silence. But remember this, God never forgets anyone. If you must wait, it is not because he doesn't care. It is because he is preparing something better. He is working behind the scenes, arranging pieces you cannot yet see. He is writing your story in a way that you do not yet understand. When Mary and Martha ran to Jesus, weeping over the death of their brother Lazarus, they cried out that they had sent word to him earlier, pleading for him to come and heal their brother. But Jesus had not come immediately. He had made them wait. And as they mourned, believing that all hope was lost, that his delay was a denial, Jesus did something greater than they could have ever imagined. He raised Lazarus from the dead. Had he arrived earlier, they would have seen a lesser miracle, a healing. But because he arrived at his perfect time, they witnessed a far greater miracle, resurrection. Sometimes what we think is too late is actually right on time in God's plan. Sometimes waiting is not an empty pause, but a divine preparation for something greater. And in those moments, all we need to do is keep trusting, because even when we don't see it, God is working. He has not forgotten your prayers. He has not forgotten your dreams. He has not forgotten you. And one day, When the door opens, when the miracle arrives, you will realize that the waiting was never in vain. Delay does not mean denial. It only means that God has something better in store for you. Pressure and challenges are training. Have you ever looked at someone who has endured immense suffering, yet still stands strong, and wondered, how do they bear it all? There are people who, despite having walked through the darkest days, still carry a resilient light in their eyes, as if nothing could break them. Do you know what made them this way? Not luck, not fate's favor, but trials. No sword is ever sharpened without fire. No gold is ever purified without being melted. Faith is the same. No one develops strong faith through easy days. Faith is not built in safety, but in the moments when everything around you crumbles and you are forced to choose, give up or keep believing. Think about the great figures in the Bible. The people we admire are not those who never stumbled, but those who were pushed to the brink of despair and still rose again. Samson, the strongest man in history, also tasted the ultimate pain of failure. He once had everything: supernatural strength, victory on the battlefield, and the admiration of his entire nation. But in a moment of weakness, he lost it all. What did his enemies do when they captured him? They did not kill him immediately. No, they took away his eyes. A warrior without sight, what could be more devastating? They chained him like an animal, that of forcing him into humiliating labor. There must have been nights when Samson sat in the darkness and wondered, has God abandoned me? But what his enemies did not know was that Samson's hair was growing back. And when the time came, God turned his defeat into victory. A blind, seemingly useless Samson pulled down an entire temple, destroying more enemies in that single act than in any battle before. Then there was Jephthah, a man his own people once rejected. He was born into a family that refused to acknowledge him. His own brothers cast him out, calling him unworthy. But do you know something? Sometimes the ones whom the world rejects are the very ones God chooses. And when the nation fell into danger, they came back to Jephthah, begging him to lead them. He could have sought revenge, could have abandoned them just as they had abandoned him, but he didn't. He rose up, took up his weapons, and fought. A man once deemed worthless became the hero who saved his people. These men were not born great. They became great because they endured trials, suffered losses, and still chose to believe. You might be in a season where everything seems to be against you. You might feel like you are being refined in fire, like every door is closing, like no one is standing by your side. But remember, gold only becomes pure when it is tested by fire. Do not fear the challenges, because it is these very challenges that are shaping you. And if you do not give up, one day you will see that all the suffering you endured was not in vain. God never allows you to go through something just to break you. He allows you to walk through the fire so that you can become the strongest version of yourself. The days ahead will be more glorious. There are days when it feels like the world has turned its back on you. The dreams that once shone brightly now lie in shattered pieces at your feet. The plans that once painted a vivid picture of the future now exist only as broken, unfinished lines. Loss can come like a storm, sweeping away everything you hold dear, leaving behind a suffocating emptiness. And then, in a quiet moment, you wonder, is there anything left to hope for? But remember this, the days ahead will be more glorious. Human history is a series of losses, but also a series of restorations. A field may burn to ashes, yet from the ruins new sprouts will rise. A road may be buried under a winter storm, but when spring arrives, it will open again, leading to new lands. God never allows your losses to be the final chapter. He continues writing your story in ways you could never have imagined. Look at the story of Naomi. Perhaps no one understood the pain of loss better than she did. Naomi once had everything: a loving family, a peaceful life. But then loss struck like a merciless storm. She lost her husband. She lost both of her sons. Her heart was so torn apart by grief that when she returned to her homeland, she no longer wanted to be called Naomi, because Naomi meant pleasant, and her life had lost all traces of sweetness. "Call me Mara," she said, "because the Almighty has made my life very bitter." A woman walking through the marketplace, her back bent under the weight of a past she could not escape. Who could blame her? Sometimes the pain is so overwhelming that it blinds us to the last remaining light of hope. But God had not forgotten her, and her story was not over. Naomi did not know that amid all her losses, God was preparing something miraculous. A young woman named Ruth, her daughter-in-law, refused to leave her even when life became unbearably difficult. Ruth remained steadfast by her side, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, love still endures. And it was Ruth, a Moabite woman, an outsider, whom God chose to become the great-grandmother of King David, from whose lineage Jesus Christ would one day be born. Naomi may have believed that her life would end in bitterness, but God rewrote her final chapters with blessings and restoration. What she had lost could never be replaced, but what she received was greater than anything she could have imagined. You may be in Naomi's place right now, feeling like every door has closed, like it's too late for things to change. But remember, God does not measure your story by what has been lost, but by what He is going to restore. Do not let pain convince you that the future holds no hope. Do not let today's darkness make you forget that the sun still rises every morning. God is not only the one who takes away, He is also the one who gives. No trial is meaningless and no tear goes unnoticed by Him. And even when you think it is all over, God may still be preparing something greater than anything you have ever hoped for, because the days ahead will be more glorious. Prayer and the declaration of faith. There is a truth that few recognize at first. Every great thing begins with something seemingly small. A tiny seed can grow into a mighty tree. A small spark can ignite a fire large enough to warm an entire village. And a sincere prayer, even if it is nothing more than a sigh whispered in the quiet of the night, can bring about a permanent transformation in a person's life. Prayer is more than words. Prayer is not just a simple act. It is not merely a collection of words spoken in moments of helplessness or despair. In reality, every prayer is a declaration, a powerful statement that we are not alone, that there is one who listens, who cares, and who is working even when we cannot see. In every heartfelt prayer, there is an unshaken belief that God is our refuge, our healer, the source of all good things we can ever hope for. Prayer is not just speaking, it is also receiving. But there is something not everyone realizes right away. Prayer is not just about speaking, it is also about receiving. When we pray, we are not only talking, we are also listening. We are positioning our hearts to receive an answer from God, whether that answer comes immediately or requires a long period of waiting. And in that very waiting, faith is refined. Just as iron is forged in fire to become a sharp sword, a person's faith grows stronger when they learn to trust even when they have yet to see the outcome. Faith declares victory before it sees it. History has proven this truth. There have been people who dared to stand in the midst of adversity and declare victory, even while they were still in the middle of the battle. They did not just pray with hope, they prayed with certainty. They declared victory, not because they had already seen it with their eyes, but because they knew God had promised it, and He never breaks His promises. The warrior's mindset. Imagine a warrior stepping onto the battlefield without believing in victory. He holds his sword with trembling hands, unsure whether he will overcome. Then, picture another warrior facing an enemy far stronger than himself, yet his eyes burn with confidence. He declares victory even before the battle begins, not out of arrogance, but because he knows who stands with him. Faith works the same way. When you pray with absolute trust in God, when you declare that victory is already yours even before it manifests, you are not only transforming your own spirit, you are triggering a shift in the world around you. This is why the declaration of faith holds such incredible power. Look at the stories in the Bible. There was once a man who stood before the sea with an entire nation waiting behind him. In front of him was an endless ocean, behind him an army in pursuit. With human eyes, there was no way forward, but he did not panic. He declared that God would make a way, and he did. And the sea parted before him. That was not a random miracle. It was a miracle activated by faith. What will you declare today? So today, what will you do? Will you look at the obstacles in your life and say, there is no way out? Or will you look at them and declare, God will make a way? Will you pray with doubt, or will you pray with unwavering conviction? The power of declaration. The difference between an ordinary life and an extraordinary one often comes down to one simple thing. One person dares to declare victory while the other does not. Rise up and declare your faith. Rise up. Declare your faith. Expect the good that is coming because God has promised that he will never abandon you. And when you have believed, when you have prayed, when you have declared victory, walk forward with the certainty that blessings are on their way to you because God never breaks his promises. Is a declaration because prayer is not just words. Prayer is a declaration. And when you declare with complete faith, all of heaven will answer. My loving Lord, I come before you today, my heart filled with thoughts, but also overflowing with gratitude. Life at times leaves me exhausted, surrounded by challenges, feeling as though I have no strength left to keep going. Sometimes the enemy whispers in my ear that nothing will change, that my prayers have been forgotten, that I have been left behind. But I refuse to believe these lies because I know that you are faithful, the one who never abandons me. Lord, even when I cannot see it, I believe that you are working. You are making a way where there is none. You are lifting me up when I am weak. You are refining my faith like a goldsmith purifying gold, making me stronger and more radiant with every trial I face. I remember that in the Bible, Samson and Jephthah went through times when all seemed hopeless, yet you turned their defeats into victories. Today, I believe that the suffering I endure is not the end of my story, but merely a chapter in the glorious testimony you are writing for my life. I know that waiting does not mean rejection. You have not forgotten my prayers. But in these days of waiting, I ask you to help me be patient and trust in you. If I must wait, let me wait with joy and hope, not with worry and fear. If I must walk through trials, let me not walk alone, but always in the presence of your guiding hand. Lord, I declare that my days ahead will be more glorious than the days behind me. I refuse to let pain and loss define me. I choose to believe in your promise that you can restore even what I have lost. The story of Naomi reminds me that nothing is beyond the reach of your love and power. Today, I declare my faith in you. I do not simply ask, I proclaim that victory is already mine because I belong to you. I declare that I am not abandoned, not forgotten, not rejected, for you are my God, heck, the one who loves me and always moves on my behalf. I believe that good things are coming. I believe that you will do great things beyond what I could ever imagine. Lord, keep me in your peace. Let my heart remain steadfast in trust so that whether I stand on the mountaintop or walk through the valley, I will still sing praises to your name. Because I know that I do not walk alone. You are leading me step by step until I see the fullness of your glory revealed in my life. In the name of Jesus Christ, I pray. Amen. Amen.